You look here at Romans chapter 1 and again in verse 18. Verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men. I want to stop there. God's wrath, God's righteous anger, God's retribution is revealed from heaven against. You say against what? Against trees? Against animals? Against the earth? No. Against men, mankind. Well, why is it? Well, it did tell you in verse 18. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men. Ungodliness and unrighteousness. That we live unlike God. We don't glorify God. We don't put God first. We are ungodly. No God in our life. And unrighteousness, no right in our life. It's called sin or wrong. And so because of ungodliness and unrighteousness is the reason His wrath is revealed. But verse 18 is saying more than that. Let's reread it again. Romans 1 and verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. And now we see that the accusation, the charge is that mankind is not only is ungodly and unrighteous, but he is that while holding the truth. He possesses the truth that there is a God. He possesses the truth that there's right and wrong. He's a moral God. And possessing that truth, some will have suppressed. He pushes that truth away with full knowledge of the truth and sins anyway. That's why the wrath of God is revealed. Let me use a little example to help us understand. Say as you walked in tonight and you got a brand new pair of shoes. And there they were all shiny. And there's a little toddler here tonight, maybe a year and a half, just learning to walk, and they're slobbering, and they just kind of sway over to you and kind of fall and step over your new shoes and slobber on them. You're really not upset, are you? You say, don't worry, the poor little thing couldn't help it. It was ignorant. And there's really no wrath or anger because you understand they could not help what they were doing, and you're a compassionate person. But let's change it. You walk in tonight with your new shoes, you say, hello, Brother Randy. I look at you and step on that shoe and spit on them. Is your reaction any different? It's different for one reason. You'll have righteous anger because I knew exactly what I was doing. This is the charge here. That mankind has not only sinned, but mankind has sinned while knowing better, while knowing the truth. Not only a sinner by practice, but a sinner by choice. And that is why the claim is the wrath of God is revealed. Now, having said that, we're going to see if that charge holds up. He's going to go on to give a reason why there's no one out there in our world that is ignorant. And therefore, they're not innocent of the charge. And therefore, they desperately need salvation because they're under retribution, the judgment of God. For they're not innocent because they're not ignorant. But we do have a problem here. This gospel was not only to the Jew first, but also to the Greek or to the Gentile. And in Paul's days, the Gentiles were all the other nations other than Israel. The ones whom God never gave a law to. He never gave the Ten Commandments, the tabernacle, the temple. He never gave what we call the Old Testament. They never had Sabbath school and that. And you say, well, now, they would be ignorant. They're like that little toddler. They're doing all these wicked things, fornication, covenant breakers. They're doing all that. But they really don't know any better in their darkness. So really, we'll just leave them the way they are. They don't need God's salvation. Well, speaking of these two groups of people, the Gentiles without the law of that day, the Jew who had the law, speaking of those two groupings of people, just jump ahead for a minute to Romans 2. And look at verse 11. Romans 2 and verse 11. It says, for there is no respect of persons with God, for as many as have sinned without law shall also perish without law. And as many as sinned in the law shall be judged by the law. Both are judged. Both perish. But one does it without the law, and the other does it by the law. So what judges them are two different things, but the results are the same. Mainly what God is dealing with in Romans chapter 1 would be those Gentile nations of that day, people who didn't grow up with the Bible. He said, look how dark they are, look how ignorant they are, and look how depraved they are. Certainly God can't hold them responsible. We're going to see in the opening chapter here of Romans that all mankind is responsible for their sin because they're a sinner by choice. You say, how can that be? Well, a witness comes forth here. A witness comes forth in chapter 1. Let's look at that witness in verse 19. Why the wrath of God is revealed. Why the gospel has a judgmental side. Just payback for harm that is done. A punishment because God is righteous. He's holy. Well, it says we hold the truth in unrighteousness, verse 18. Well, he's going to go on to prove that. So look at verse 19. Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has showed it unto them. Well, the truth of the knowledge that God exists, it claims God has showed it. You say, has he come down and revealed himself to all mankind? That's not how he has showed it. Look at verse 20. Verse 20. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. The excuse to say, but nobody ever told me there was a God. I didn't have the Bible. God says, you didn't know there was a God. I revealed it in you. Well, how did you do that? Through creation. Creation reveals my power and Godhead. I'm understood even though I'm invisible. I'm understood by the things that are made. I'm clearly seen. You say, how can that be? Well, just for example, say I took you came up to see me in New York. Why you would do that this time of year is hard to imagine, but say you would. You come up to see me in New York, and I say, I'd like to show you a lovely home. My friend's not there, but he says I can show it to you. So I take you through the home, and it has 29 rooms. And it has 4 swimming pools and 3 tennis courts, and a 5-car garage and an airplane hangar, and art all over the walls, expensive art. And you say, your friend is rich. I said, how do you know that? You've never met him. I can see what he made. And you'll begin to describe some of the likes and dislikes of my friend without ever visibly seeing him by looking at what he made. That is what God is saying here. You look at creation in all its glory, and today with our technology we understand even more than the people of Paul's day. No such thing as a simple form of life, by the way. It's made up of a cell, which biologists say are more complex than the city of New York City, one cell. Replicate itself and so on. And so we see this, and it tells us behind every design, there's an intelligent designer. And the more brilliant the design, the more brilliant the designer. So that creation says to everybody there is a God. Now, we're coming back here to Romans 1, but I'd like you to go to Psalm 19 to see the Old Testament teaching on this. Psalm 19, please. And you look at verse 1. Psalm 19, verse 1. It says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. So the heavens, outer space, and our air atmosphere and above, it declares the glory of God. It preaches something. Look what kind of a preacher it is in verse 2. Day unto day uttereth speech, night unto night showeth knowledge. It communicates 24 hours a day through the brilliance of daytime and the brilliance of nighttime. It's a much longer preacher than I am. Okay, 24 hours a day, it is communicating. But not only 24 hours a day, look at verse 3. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. I go places, I need a translator. It slows me, cuts my material down by about 50%. And I have to go through a translator sometimes. Creation doesn't. Every speech, every dialect, every tongue understands it. It's multilingual in its presentation. But look at verse 4. It's international in its scope. It just doesn't preach in a little pocket of the country. It's international. Look at verse 4. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. And them hath he set a tabernacle or dwelling place for the sun, which is as the bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoiceth as a strong man to run a race. His going forth, that is the sun, is from the end of the heaven, and a circuit unto the ends of it, and there is nothing hid from the heat of it. So when that sun comes out, it affects everything on planet Earth to 1 degree or nothing. another. Nothing's hid from the heat related to creation. Nothing is hid from the message of creation. Every dialect, every corner of the globe has this message of creation that says there is a Godhead and power by the very things that I made. So that God is revealed in this sense in Romans 1 apart from the Bible. Not to say the Bible doesn't reveal them, but you can know about God apart from the Bible. And that would answer the dilemma of the Gentiles.